Howdy, howdy, and welcome to Workshop Wednesday. Guess what we're going to be talking about today? It's our updates workshop. So once a month we cover what's new. That basically goes back into the previous month and looks at what was released. So we're going to see all sorts of the new features and details that have come through here. My name is Chris Mercer. For those of you who have not met, welcome to Workshop Wednesday here at measurementmarketing.io. I do go by Mercer, and I'm the co-founder here at measurementmarketing.io, where we help marketers, marketing teams, and agencies essentially know the numbers and grow their numbers using tools like Data Studio, analytics. We're big into training on all this stuff. We use the Measurement Marketing Framework to do that. Now, you can see our content in addition, of course, at measurementmarketing.io, over at Digital Marketer. You may see us at Conversion Excel, Social Media Examiner, Seriously Simple Marketing, and others around the web. With all of these workshops, your main goal is to grab one new concept, one new idea. And in this case, it's no different because we're going to cover a bunch of different things that have updated in these different tools. And so pick one thing, go practice it, then you come back, rewatch this workshop. That's why it's there. And you can pick up something else and kind of integrate these new features if you think that they're useful for your own setups. All right, without further ado, what's new? Updates and features released in March 2019. Now, of course, we're going to start with a quick putting this in context using the Measurement Marketing Framework. We've got 5 stages to the framework. There's planning, building, reporting, forecasting, and optimizing. So remember, planning is all about what questions are you trying to answer and what are you going to do with those answers? What actions actually will those answers allow you to take? Then there's the building where you actually set stuff up like in Tag Manager and Analytics. And definitely today you will see some features that you can use in the build out. Then there's the reporting where you actually are building out dashboards that answer questions, not just provide information. And that's where Data Studio comes in as a fantastic tool. And there's been lots of updates to Data Studio over the last 30 days. So we'll take a look at those. And then once you have your reports, your dashboards, you can begin to forecast your near future. And then as you have your forecast all set, you can come back and run actual traffic, and then you optimize because you're going to see where you're hitting the mark and where you didn't. Because, of course, you're measuring all the stuff that you're forecasting. So it makes it kind of easier to do marketing all of a sudden when you've got that level of visibility. So that is the Measurement Marketing Framework that we all know and love. Now, we're going to go ahead and jump right in to take a look at some of these updates. What I'm going to bring up first is Google Analytics because for 2 reasons. One is there wasn't a whole lot of updates this past month for GA. But I did want to demonstrate at least one of them that you may have seen that has popped up, and that is our little assistants. Everything is trying to get into this assistant type thing. This actually does a number of different things. So you can ask it questions. So like, how many users did I have in January 2019? And I have not tried any of this. So let's just see how it does. So January, see if we can even figure it out. And it kind of did. There you go. January 20. Here's the number of users. And so it pulls up. So you can ask questions, and then it will pull up the report, right? The information that you have. So again, is this useful? Maybe. It depends kind of what specifically you're asking. Mostly you wouldn't ask questions of Google that are going to probably lead to any action, but they could be investigative questions, right? That you're ultimately trying to answer, like, do I improve my, scale up my Facebook campaign, or do I take it off, right? Do I remove budget from it? And maybe the number of users in January would help you answer that question. So there's one way to get answers to some of the stuff in Google Analytics. Again, it's Google Analytics' attempt at helping people use the tool and get access to all the information that it has there without being overwhelmed. So this could be one way of doing that. The other things that it does is you can see here, let's say you're looking for a report. I can type in source medium and go, oh yeah, source medium, that's what I want. So I can flip down here automatically, just hit enter, and then I get taken to the source medium report if I'm not sure where it is, right? Now, if you use this all the time, obviously no acquisition, all traffic, source medium, but even having to type on or click on this and then click on that and then click on that, it's faster just to type in source medium. And then you can pull it up. So you have that. And then finally, in addition to your insights, which is this little section here, and I'll show you this, just basically it's the same thing you do when you ask questions. It pulls up like, oh, here's the different insights. But you can pull up help. So you can say, okay, I want to know source medium help. And you can click that and it takes you into Google Analytics help. Which again, sometimes is perfect for what you need and sometimes not. Of course, if you are an Academy member and you want some specific help over your situation, just ask us. It's probably faster. Even though Google is getting much better at trying to help people understand the tools, sometimes they're so generic, necessarily generic, when they offer that advice that it's a little tough to apply for your situation. So of course, just ask us. All right, but that's it. So you've got additional ways to get help. You've got the insights. You've got the ability to ask questions, and of course, a shortcut to reports. That was sort of the biggest visual change to Google Analytics that we've noticed as of March. Now, the other thing that's interesting, but behind the scenes, is there has been an API update to the core API. And something like that is pretty major, like, because the last time they did this was in 2018, right? It's been a while. And this API update just opened up the ability, and this is for those of you who are super technical that might need this, but otherwise it's just kind of a curiosity item, where in the API now, in the core API, which is the one that builds all of these reports, right? So not the multi-channel funnel reports, that's a different API, but everything else is the core API. So this is a big deal. It affects a lot of reports. Well, what they allowed here with the API is you can go in and buy user ID. So by either client ID or user ID. Remember, there's two. You can actually set up user ID tracking. And so you can go in by client ID or user ID and pull specific information about that user's journey. So very specific information, you can pull it out through API. So if you are doing some things with API with Google Analytics, that could be something interesting. Like, now know that you have that ability to do that. And what I think is really interesting on that, it's probably, if I had to guess, and again, I am the most unqualified when it comes to guessing, so full disclosure, it's purely just a guess, but it makes sense to me that it's probably related to privacy and GDPR and sort of the continuing ripples that are coming from that, because part of GDPR was saying, okay, data is going to be in the hands of the person who creates the data, not who stores the data, right? So Google Analytics stores the data. We as business entities are controlling that data or processing that data, right, from GDPR. But the users, the actual people on their websites, they are the owners of that data. That's kind of where the direction is, right? So with that in mind, part of GDPR was being able to say, well, here's the information that you have. Here's a record of information that you have, and they're trying to make it easier and more transparent for these big, gigantic platforms to allow individual users to say, okay, what information do you have on me? Like, I own the data. I want to see what you've collected. It's mine. It's mine to be able to do that. And it's been very difficult to do that. Like, that's something that, as much as it is the spirit of the law to try to get to that point, it's hard to do. Because platforms weren't really designed for that stuff. So now this API will allow tools to be able to be created that can do things like that. So we're still a little ways away from making that super easy to do. But with that API, that's kind of interesting that now you can, at least in theory, pull something like that. And that can open up a whole new world of possibilities and third-party systems that can come in and help pull that stuff up for the user. So again, one sort of cosmetic change that is interesting. I don't personally know that I'll use this tool an awful lot because we build our reports to answer questions already. So we're getting most of the stuff done in something like Data Studio, but it's interesting, and it could be something you should at least play around with a little bit to know that it's there and how to use it. But that API thing is something I'll be keeping an eye on just to see what others are doing with it. Like, now that exists as a thing, what will the market create where they're using that API? So I think it's kind of interesting to keep an eye on that stuff. And that was something that was released in March. Okay, so that's analytics. Next up, Tag Manager. Now, Tag Manager has not really had a bunch of updates over these past few months as we've gone through this, right? Because just sort of just skip through Tag Manager. Not some minor things have come through that have been great, things like formatting variables and such. But this month, there actually was some pretty interesting changes that came through. So I'm going to show you a couple of those. Actually, I'll show you all of them because that's what we're here for. First is, let's go into the scroll triggers. So in our scroll trigger, you can see how this is set up, and yours may be like this as well, especially if you set it up a little while back. So this is our scroll depth trigger. Well, if you click into this and edit it, you will now notice this enable this trigger on. This is new. And this is on both scroll triggers as well as YouTube video triggers. So the built-in triggers for YouTube videos and for scroll. Now, why did they do this? They did this because, and I'm included in this group, I'm sure I was firing some of these too early, where the scroll depth trigger was firing at certain times, maybe a little bit earlier than it needed to, and it could not fire because the scroll depth trigger, the way it works is it needs to, in order to figure out percentages, it has to know if it's 10%. How does it know if it's 10%? First, it's got to measure the page. And then it goes, oh, now I'm 10% of the way, right? So it has to do all that measurement stuff to set up first before it even knows if it's 10% or 25% or 50%. So it really should be enabled, right? Started to actually sort of do its thing when window load happens. So it can't even do its thing until, in this case, window load. This is the default, by the way. And this is their best practice. This is what they recommend. Like, make sure, and you know this in Tag Manager world, You've got your page view, you've got your DOM ready, then you've got your window loaded event. The window loaded essentially is where the browser's confirming that, okay, we're done, right? So the window load event is sort of the final signal that the page is completely loaded. Everything else is a stage up until that point. So when the window's loaded, that means, okay, now I've got everything. Go forth and measure and do your calculations and whatever else you want because everything's here. That's why they set this up. And this did not used to be a thing. Now it's a thing. So enable this trigger. It'll be defaulted to this. Of course, you can change it if you want, but window load is there. The other thing that's also interesting is that instead of saying page view here, they said container load. That might make me think that preview is going to change. Instead of saying page load, it might say container load in the future because technically that's what it is. It's loading the container script, right? But that's a little beside the point. I just sort of interested to find that pattern and see if that languaging gets out there more and more. But that's it. So we've got the window load is default. And of course, you don't need to do anything. It should already be there, but just know that it's a thing. If we go to new, and I know we've got some YouTube triggers, but just to show you anyway, YouTube video trigger, same thing, right? So it's at the DOM ready. Window loaded is kind of where they recommend best practice to be set up on because they want the entire browser loaded. And then it starts calculating, can it see the play button? So some of you may have had this issue before where you try to set up a YouTube video and it just doesn't work, or sometimes works and sometimes doesn't. And maybe that's why, is because the trigger was enabling itself too early before it had all the information that it needed to actually function. So they've put this little default delay in there. So those of you who are familiar with listeners are probably kind of familiar with this. Like back in version 1 days, you had to set up a listener first before you could actually start doing the thing you were listening for. And then they sort of integrated. Well, this is sort of that same concept of, okay, let's not, enable the trigger is basically like listen for this stuff at this point and then start paying attention. So again, window load, kind of the best practice when you look at the support docs. So know that those are out there and those are new. And as you start setting these up for yourself or for other clients in the future, that you should adjust those. Now, the other thing also is around triggers, and this is pretty interesting. So this is right down here. Brand new trigger type. Yay, it's been a while since we've had one of these. And I'm always kind of curious as like, what else can they do to make things even easier for us? Trigger groups are one of those things. So a trigger group is exactly what it sounds like. It is a group of triggers. So what you can do is you can say, okay, I want the DOM to be ready, and then I want the page view to have the original cookie with the original referrer, and I'm just going to randomly choose another one. Then the window loaded, or let's say, and all a click text there. Then the click happens. So what this does is this is a group of existing triggers. You can see it went to an existing triggers list. And what happens is this is like a checklist now. So if I save this as a trigger, so I can say, my trigger group, right? So I have this as a trigger group. What happens is if I associate this trigger now, which is a group of triggers, what it does is this is a checklist. So when the DOM's ready, it's going to say, okay, is the DOM ready? Yep, cool. Check one. Is this page view? Maybe not yet, but then there's the page view that happens. It goes, cool. That's another check. Then did they click on the register now? Yes, they did. Okay, check, check, check. When all three of these things happen, then it fires the trigger group. Okay, so when all three of these things happen, then it fires the trigger group. Now, again, does this give you new versatility? Sort of, because a lot of the times you could have come up with a different way of doing this. I could say, okay, when the DOM is ready, for example, I could say only on some DOM events, do it when the refer contains, whatever the refer was. And then when the click, class contains this, but it's only at the DOM ready event, right? So that's the difference between a trigger group and this, is this sort of says like, check when the DOM ready occurs, check these other things are also happening at this point in time. Okay. Whereas a trigger group says, just make sure the triggers have happened. And it's just like a checklist. Yes, this trigger happened. And then later this trigger happened. And then later this trigger happened. Now fire the tag. And that's the difference between the trigger group. And the other cool thing about a trigger group, and I think I'll probably use it more for this, is you can set this up with custom events. So in this case, and remember, custom events are the things that you can create. You can do data layer pushes for. And that's kind of what I'm thinking is using it for something like I can push events into the data layer now, and then I can basically set up a group trigger, or a trigger group, I should say, to say, okay, when the data layer, or sorry, basically when in this page view, in this visit of the load, when these 3 events occur. Now remember, this is not session based. This is still based on the page view that you're currently looking at, because that's how Tag Manager works, right? The container's loaded, and then it's going to start recording for these. But if these 3 events happen at that point in time, then fire this trigger, right? Fire the tag that's associated to this trigger. So you can, again, these are like checklist items. So it's, did this happen? Yes. Did this happen? Yes. Did this happen? Finally, yes, it did. Great. Now fire. And events are happening at different points in time with Tag Manager, right? Just like when you see the preview window and you've got that left-hand screen of all the different Tag Manager events that are being recorded in the left-hand pane there. Those are all different points in time. And now you can set up a group trigger to say, well, as long as this has happened and this has happened and this has happened, then fire this other thing. And I'm positive there are some pretty cool use cases that maybe, there have been other ways to kind of do it, but there are a lot more complex moving pieces, and trigger groups could help solve that. So know that is now a thing that you can play with. And it's not the easiest thing in the world. You got to scroll all the way down to the very bottom under trigger group, but that's what that is. And it's just it's literally that. It is a group of triggers. Not all the triggers have to be true at the same time, but they do have to be true in that same view of the page, right? So as Tag Manager is loading and it's collecting everything, then make sure this trigger's happened, this trigger's happened, and this trigger's happened sometime in that journey of that page before they go on to the next page, because obviously then it sort of resets itself. So trigger groups, that was a pretty cool change for Google Tag Manager, and it's nice to see that tool continues to evolve and that they're going back and they're helping those of us who do not have like this incredible level of technical skill, which I know many people have. Like Simo Hava's amazing technical ability when it comes to this. A lot of developers are starting to jump in the Tag Manager and really understand it and use it, and they already know, like, don't fire this stuff until, don't fire the scroll trigger until it's ready. But the rest of us don't. And Tag Manager is, I think the team at Tag Manager is making it easier for us to be more technically adept and protect ourselves from making what everybody else would see as a very simple, easy mistake to make. But now it's like, hey, don't enable this until here. And before that was kind of harder to do. Now it's easier to do. So really, really cool things that they're allowing now. And of course, with the trigger groups, I think that's just fascinating to be able to say, okay, now I have a checklist that I can kind of use, a little checklist trigger. I think that's pretty cool. So take a look at those. Last but not least, never is this thing least. Data Studio for the win again. Data Studio gives us the most changes. Again, kudos to the Data Studio team. They have just knocked this thing out of the park. They're constantly iterating this product. So if you have not yet jumped into Data Studio, you can see my fancy report here that I've played around with. It's fantastic. We use it for all of our clients. We use it for ourselves. And you should as well. So play with this thing because there's new stuff coming out all the time. March was definitely not an exception. So what happened in March? One, they've got a version history now. So if you go to File, you'll see version history. Also kind of looks like Google Docs, right? Now, if you're used to Google Docs, like this is kind of cool because you can say, oh man, this is where, April 3rd was let's say, April 3rd made some changes where I was like, no, that screwed things up. So let's go back to March 6th and I'll restore this version, right? Pretty cool. Like the fact that they're doing that. So they use sort of automatic backups of your Data Studio reports using version history. So now you've got that. Okay. So version history, know that that's there. If something gets messed up, hopefully there's a version that's back there as well. Kind of works like Google Docs, same sort of concept. You can also do an email delivery update. So you can actually schedule email deliveries when you do that. So in order to do that, I think, let's see here, where's the email delivery? Should be something up here that allows that. There it is, schedule email delivery. So that's our little icon there. And I could say, hey, here are the recipients, this, schedule by, send it to, and it will send them a PDF. So just like here, you can download PDFs. This will actually send them a PDF. And I think that's pretty cool that you could do that. So you can edit the schedule and send it to your clients or to your C-level executives and automate the reporting a little bit because that's been a big deal. Data Studio, we've always been able to do this, but it's been a little more manual labor to automate reports, but not anymore. So you can do that. Rolling dates, also new, not really new, but you can include all sorts of new custom rolling dates to pull in there. So, play around with that. You can go into advanced and then really start going into, all sorts of cool combinations if it's useful. Some examples, last 52 weeks from, last week. So that could be a rolling average. So you can customize instead of using the standard last 30 days, last 7 days. You can really get into some specifics and change some things of what people are looking for. So just sort of be aware of what you've got involved here and play with that. So lots of cool things when it comes to dates that might be a little bit more useful for you. Again, most people probably will use the standard built-ins, but the custom rolling dates are, I think, useful. So just because there are going to be some use cases for when you would want to do that. Let's see. Next up, you can change the size of pages. Okay, that wasn't ever a thing that you could do. You were sort of just stuck on what it is. But now I believe if you go here and you go to current page, so under page, you go to current page settings. And then under the page settings, I believe it's under style, you will be able to go to canvas size. There you go. Perfect. So there's our size. We'd say, oh, I want this landscape version or whatever. Change your pixels. And this is per page. So if you have different pages that are on here, you'll notice this one is, let's just make this radically different here. So I'll go to style, custom. Let's make this portrait. So now I've got that one. And then my page 1, back to landscape. So pretty interesting that you can create individual pages now that are different sizes. So when somebody's going to report, it's kind of customized. It doesn't have a lot of extra white space or things to scroll around in. So it's, again, tiny thing. But from a design standpoint, I think it makes it a lot more useful. So you can keep the end users, in this case, looking at the report, a little more focused on what they need to be focused on and easier to process. Anything you can make this thing easier to use, the better it's going to be. Okay, next up. Columns. So one thing is being able to drag and adjust columns. This is new because it used to always just sort of do it for all the columns. Now you can do individuals. So you can do that. I believe we can make this fit as well. So under resize columns, we can say fit to data, and then it'll automatically fit to the data itself. I assume somewhere down here in this 59, there's a longer data set of ad content. That's why it's so long. So that makes sense. And I can also resize distribute evenly so that everything's equal. So you have that as well. The other thing you can do is in chart table, go to style. I believe now we can do, there you go. So column 1, I can center that. And then column 2, I can right justify that. And then column 3, I want to center that. So you can get a little bit more detail. Again, these are design standpoints, but these are the things that make the tool more usable, make the end result easier to understand and easier for the end user to get the answers that they're looking for, which means they're going to use all the reports you're taking forever to build. Like these things, as much as people think dashboards are quick and easy, they're not. You and I know that. There's a lot of back end that goes into this. You're cleaning the data, you're stitching together stuff, you're finally getting it in the right spot. You spend all this time creating a dashboard, which is amazing and does exactly what they wanted it to do, but then they don't use it. Because they get in here and they go, oh, no, this is hard. I don't even know what this is telling me. And they don't even try. And part of that happens because they just get overwhelmed by all the data, because not everybody's intimately familiar with this as much as you are, especially around tables. So if you take the time to format your table, put some spacing, make it a little easier to get through and a little more inviting, use the brand colors, right? Changing the colors, even things like that are super simple. And again, assigning the page and making the dates easy to read, all that stuff makes it so that your end user will more likely use the report, actually get benefit from it, and then they will love you and they will love your reports. And they'll stop asking for reports over and over again, hopefully, because they'll be using the ones they already have. Even win-win. So again, that was pretty much it for March. Was the table updates, we had the ability to change pages, version history, the ability to schedule email updates. Lots of cool changes though. Like that just goes to show Data Studio is constantly entering in more and more details. And I'm still looking for kind of some cool examples of community visualizations coming through. We're starting to see more and more of those come through. That was something that came out a number of months ago, but now the development sort of community is out there and they're starting to share more of these. So keep an eye out on stuff like that. You'll see new chart styles and things you can access through here. In fact, I'm just going to show you this for kicks because I think we can. Oh, this one doesn't have it. Sorry, I can't do that. Man, how's that for a tease? But you can add it in there. I just didn't do it in this report, but add it into your system, and you will actually be able to import different visualizations that are coming through. So not so much an update, more of just a reminder. This is a thing that you might not know is there, and because it's just easy to skip through. But the community features is just, man, that's enticing to me as a user of Data Studio, because when you allow your product to go into the marketplace is one thing, but to allow the marketplace to help you evolve your product is a whole new thing. And the marketplace is doing exactly that. They're coming up with some pretty cool visualizations, some pretty cool data styles and charts that just don't exist built in, but they do in the marketplace. And I think that's great because it's going to help Data Studio to continue to evolve. And it's a free tool. Need I remind you how amazing this thing is? So again, thank you, Google, and keep it up. All right, that's it. There was nothing really new and exciting in the world of Facebook analytics. We did take a look, but nothing seemed overly interesting there enough to bring up for at least this month. So maybe next month they will iterate that. But that does bring us to a close, at least for these updates. Hopefully you got at least one new thing, remembering, in Google Analytics, maybe it's the idea of, I didn't realize I can use it to find quickly the reports I'm looking for, or to ask for help if I needed that, or to, just ask it a question, have it spit me out an actual result that hopefully will be right, and something useful. In Tag Manager, trigger groups, huge. But also understanding why the event listeners have been set up, the little trigger enabled on thing has been set up for both scroll and for YouTube triggers. That was another huge change. And of course, with Data Studio, being able to schedule email deliverability. If you're doing PDFs for clients, it might want to take a look at that. Practice that first, see what the end result looks like, but it might be something worthwhile for you to take a useful look at. Version history, so you can see kind of who did what and what the different versions are, and sort of edit, undo if things go horribly wrong, or somebody else is in there and messes something up. You can undo it, which is kind of cool. Or hopefully we'll be able to. And then you've got the design elements that came through in terms of the tables that were there. You can do the table charts and resizing columns and centering and everything else that's available there, changing the page sizes, and even highly adjusting, incredibly customization when it comes to rolling dates, if that's something that you need as well for your report. So one of those is hopefully at least one new thing that you can go back and practice, take a look at. Then you come back, watch this again, pick something else up. Now, if you are not yet an Academy member, I definitely encourage you to become one. It's perfect. If you're an agency, you've got multiple team members, that's kind of what it's there for, is for teams. So Measurement Marketing Academy, measure.tips/start. It's got multiple logins, ton of group coaching ability, workshops. All the workshops that we've ever done are back there. You can literally just go back and ask it a question. It'll pop up a workshop that'll show you exactly how to do the thing you're looking for. You've got Ask an Instructor support. Like I said, group coaching, speaking of, every Wednesday at 3:30 p.m. Eastern. If you are already an Academy member, thank you, of course. And we look forward to you joining Office Hours Member Q&A, which is kind of where that group coaching happens. So that's every Wednesday at 3:30 p.m. Eastern. We do that where the instructors are on live and you can just chat out your problems. Some people show up just to sort of be a fly on the wall and listen to what others are going through, and others are just trying to solve problems. And sometimes it's easier to talk it out with somebody and share screens, and that's kind of what we do. So we keep them to nice small groups, but you're more than welcome to join. If you're an Academy member, you will have the link in your email, or you will be able to check inside the Academy and click on the link and it'll pull it up. So whatever is easier for you. And that brings us to a close. You've just watched What's New, updates and features released in March 2019. Thanks again for joining this workshop, and we will see you on the next one. Take care.